We spent 4 nights in Copenhagen with our family in the winter, and before I started making travel videos, I'd have done what most people do. Googled the top 10 things to do, tried to squeeze in as many as possible, and ended up exhausted and slightly over budget. So in this video, I'm going to save you from that. I'm ranking every single activity that we actually did from S tier to D tier on 3 things: how good it is for kids, whether it's generally worth the money, and whether we'd do it again. And I'll tell you right now, one of Copenhagen's most famous attractions ends up in a place that is going to surprise you. If you've been thinking about including it, you'll want to hear this before you book. First up, Nyhavn, the famous colourful harbour that's on every Copenhagen postcard. And I want to reassure you straight away, it absolutely lives up to what you've seen online. Even in winter, there's something about those buildings against a grey sky that just works. It's easy to navigate with little ones, there's plenty of space to move around, and the canal boat tours that leave from here are a really good way to see the city without doing a huge amount of walking. Worth thinking about if you've got younger kids whose legs tire out quickly. If you do plan to sit down and eat or drink right here on the waterfront, you'll pay for that view. To be honest, I would go there for the atmosphere, get the photos, and then walk around about 5 minutes for somewhere to eat. You'll pay a lot less for the same food. A tier, beautiful, practical, generally worth it. Right, here's the one that I mentioned at the start, the one that ends up somewhere you probably weren't expecting. The Little Mermaid statue, definitely D tier. And I generally feel for anyone who has this on their list because I know how it feels to have built something up. To be honest, in winter it's even worse than usual. You're walking 25 minutes in the cold or paying for a harbour bus to stand in front of a statue. Our kid looked at it for about 30 seconds, asked what it was for, and turned around. And that's if you can even view the statue with everybody else standing in front of it taking pictures. If you've got unlimited time in the city, then fine, tick it off. This is one that I'd cut out without hesitation. Your time is generally better spent elsewhere. Next, we've got Rosenborg Castle, and this is where I want to be straight with you, because the honest answer here is it depends on your kids. The castle itself is really impressive, the crown jewels are inside, the grounds are beautiful even in winter, and there's real history to it. If you're the kind of family that enjoys that, brilliant, you will love it. If your kids are on the younger side, they are going to lose interest pretty quickly once you're inside. It's quite text heavy, the rooms feel small, and there is only so long anyone can stare at some old furniture before someone starts whispering about snacks. We enjoyed it, but honestly it felt more like something that we did for us rather than our son. So before you book, think about your family. Older kids, curious kids, kids who are into history, this is probably B tier for you. Younger kids who need to be moving, you might want to save the entry fee and just walk around the gardens instead. They're free, they're lovely, and your kids won't know the difference. Now Strøgett, and this one is going to be in the C tier, and to be honest it's not because it's bad, but just because of what you can be doing with that time instead. Now in winter it has some appeal, there are Christmas market stalls dotted along, it's a decent place to have a wander and a warm up and requires zero planning. If you've flown all the way to Copenhagen with your family, you've got better things to be doing with your precious half a day than walking around shops. Now there's nothing here specifically designed for families, and it eats into time that you could be spending somewhere that generally earns its place in your itinerary. It's worth a walk through if you're already passing between places, just don't make a special trip. If you're finding this useful, this is the kind of honest, no fluff breakdown you've been looking for when planning a family trip, it would mean a lot if you subscribed. This is exactly what this channel is for, cutting through the noise so your holiday actually delivers. Right, on to the 2 that made the whole trip worthwhile. And this is one that I generally didn't see coming, and that is the Experitarium, a science museum, and it is completely hands-on, it's loud in the best possible way, and our son did not want to leave. In the winter especially, when Copenhagen can be grey and cold and you need somewhere solid that's indoor, this isn't just another cafe. Having somewhere like this up your sleeve is generally brilliant. It doesn't feel like a compromise, the kids think they're just having a world of fun, and you know they're doing something worthwhile. That's definitely a win. So many different science attractions that are just going to get their minds going, but having fun at the same time. One practical thing, definitely book online in advance. Give yourself at least 3 hours and don't try to rush it. This one definitely deserves the time. The hidden gem of the entire trip, definitely full S tier. And the one with the most hype to live up to, Tivoli Gardens, also S tier, and I'll be honest, I was nervous about this one. We went in winter and I had it in the back of my mind that it just might not deliver outside of the peak season. I was completely wrong. In winter, Tivoli transforms into this incredible Christmas market. The lights, the decorations, the atmosphere, and it's one of those rare places that actually justifies its own reputation. The rides still run, there's generally something for every age, and even just wandering around in the cold with a hot chocolate or a mulled wine felt special in a way that's hard to describe without sounding like a brochure. Now, I'll be upfront on the cost, it's not cheap, but nothing is in Copenhagen, and for what you get here, the atmosphere, the experience, the thing your kids will actually talk about when they get home, the value is there. If you do one thing from the entire list, make it Tivoli. So every activity we did across 4 nights in Copenhagen, as honestly as I can give it to you. And look, if you take nothing else from this video, take these 2 things. Tivoli is worth every penny, and do not waste your legs going to the Little Mermaid. Now, depending on where you are in the planning, I've got a lot more Copenhagen content that picks up where this leaves off. So if you're looking for things to do in Copenhagen with kids, then check out this video, or check out my entire Copenhagen playlist.